Well, I have first to share sensitive information. It was a suspicion, but it became scientific proof from the European Weather Forecast Institute that the persisting and not indigenous rain was brought by the British delegation yesterday morning. I'm sorry. When you leave Europe, you always cry. Every time I head towards an EPC summit, I'm haunted by a 16th century painting hanging in the British National Gallery. The Rape of Europa by the Grand Master of Italian Renaissance, Paolo Veronese. In it, the Princess Europa, young and radiant, stares skyward as she mounts a white bull. The bull is, of course, Zeus in disguise, the king of the gods, who will carry her away to a land from which she will never return. There is something hauntingly familiar in this myth, a resonance that feels all the more acute in the times we live in. Maybe it's because more than being a character or a fixed identity, more than the labels of West or East, a liberal or conservative, nationalist or socialist, Europe is a journey. And suddenly the journey has become much harder. Highly distinguished guests and very dear friends, trust me, I struggled to find the right words to express my delight in hosting this European Political Community Summit here in Albania. It is truly an immense honor for all my country, for all the Albanian people, to welcome you all to this country and to this purposefully constructed house for the European political community in Tirana, where you are not surrounded by the nightmare of Europa in Renaissance paintings, nor by the emptiness of a temporary gathering space. You are surrounded by Albanians' children's imagination of Europe. This was an obvious choice for us because children's dreams are never held hostage by the myths of the past. They are instead about imagining the future. Very similar, by the way, to the dream of Europe's founding fathers. And you have landed at a particularly poignant moment in this country, where we have learned to view the past through the eyes of the future and no longer to look at the future through the eyes of the past. Your arrival follows an election campaign in which Europe featured more than ever before, not as a divisive issue, but as a joint claim to identity, not as a list of policies, but as a deep yearning for belonging, not as a set of homework assignments, but as a shared destiny. That is why it is so gratifying that the campaign centered on those keywords, Europe, identity, belonging and destiny, won over 52% of the votes. For my dear friend Keir here, it was a result very similar to the Brexit referendum, but with the roles reversed, 52% for Remain, or in our case, Unite. Where it wasn't comparable, however, is the remaining 48% of the voters. They are not Eurosceptics. No, they are just ill-informed Euro-optimists who think I should have been fired for not having succeeded in uniting Albania with the EU long ago. But this is not my point. The idea of a united Europe is paradoxically both ancient and ever new. One of its earliest champions was a Frenchman in the 18th century, the Abbé de Saint-Pierre. In the ashes of the Treaty of Utrecht, after years of war, he envisioned a union of European states, a bold, idealistic vision of perpetual peace. His project even included cooperation with Russia as well as with the Balkan and Mediterranean states, then under Ottoman rule. So I guess that for the visionary Abe, today's Turkey would also be an indispensable partner in a union of perpetual peace. But the project failed, of course. It was killed by light interests and petty caprices, as Voltaire would put it, and swallowed by the fear that has long held Europe hostage. Even today, the myth of Europa persists, and the resemblance to the Europe gathered here today is striking. The dream of perpetual peace has been replaced by the nightmare of perpetual war. Instead of the bells of peace, we hear the drums of war. There is a palpable sense of shortness of breath as we confront the forces threatening Europe's very foundations. External aggression, internal fragmentation, the ghosts of imperial myths, shifting geopolitical alliances, the instability of global trade, and the deep, very deep difficulty of so many to believe in a new Europe for the new times. But I believe that there is no better moment than this one to remind us that while we rightfully think about a Europe of resistance, defense, and new military capabilities, we must not forget the other Europe, the Europe of enlightenment, human reason, and the quest for perpetual peace, not just among ourselves, but even with our enemies. That Europe, which at a certain point gave birth to the most improbable political project in human history, the European Union, taught us that even former mortal enemies could come together, their wounds still fresh from the battle, and create a bond for life. They turned old rivers of blood into new avenues of peace, agreeing that conflict could only be tamed through commerce, that free trade is essential to free minds, and that security comes not from increasing threats, but from expanding rights and equal opportunities. It was that Europe that taught us that in the midst of the most horrific conflicts, we must maintain some faith in the humanity of our enemies. Otherwise, as Immanuel Kant reminds us, when hostilities degenerate into a war of extermination, all justice is destroyed and perpetual peace becomes the burial ground of humankind. The enemies of peace should not drag us into the glorification of weapons. Here in the Balkans, we have survived war, bombs, territorial conflicts, destruction and disruption. It happened in our lifetimes, not in some distant black and white documentary archive. And we have learned that peace has no competitors. Perhaps that is why hope in that other Europe is greatest here. The most Euro-optimistic among all of us gathered today in this house live not in Paris or in Berlin, but in Tirana and Podgorica, where belief in the European ideal runs deep. We have survived economic collapse. We have survived migration and displacement. We have survived fake news even before the term was coined. And we have learned that cooperation has no losers. Perhaps that's why we believe that Europe remains the most fertile ground to turn the darker currents of history into shining paths of the future. Europe for us is as much a shared spiritual space as it is a mosaic of many different regions, languages, and religions. Perhaps that's why we feel the need, not just for new policies, but for a new kind of politics, one that redefines not only who we are, but how we are together, among us, and with the world. One that sees Europe not as a fortress to defend, nor as a museum to preserve, but as a shared soul to be protected, a shared destiny to be lived, and a shared future to be built. To do that, we must not only invest in defense and resilience, but in the hearts and minds that will carry forward Europe's soul, Europe's destiny, and Europe's future. And let me ask you, my very dear friends, why not imagine an EPC of education, of science, and artificial intelligence, and transnational lines beyond weaponry, a terrain of interconnected sources of knowledge, research, and innovation, where non-EU or not yet EU territories can become new frontiers for investments, free from bureaucracy, regulations, and fiscal burdens. A revival of what followed the fall of the Berlin Wall, when Western Europe discovered its eastern half, and the investments flowed eastward, drawing the newcomers into the embrace of a free Europe and ushering the last sustained era of growth, of real growth in the old Europe, where high dividends returned from the investments in the new frontier. Let's give Europe's young people and start-uppers a better reason to stay than just talking about weapons and rearming. And let's give them a strong motivation to build and to dream on European soil, instead of looking and going far away to follow their dreams. Our struggle cannot be solely about resisting what others might do to us. It must also be about what we must do for ourselves, our children, and our Europe. It's not just about resisting destruction, this goes without saying, but it's about daring to build, to revive the wisdom of our history, and to strengthen the faith in our own human reason capabilities. When Donald Trump says that God saved him from the bullet because the Almighty had a plan for America, he tells only half of the truth. The other half is that God had a plan for Europe too. And it could not be more obvious. Europe, once again, has a God-given opportunity to reinvent itself. Let us ensure that Europa's journey, ours in this case, is not one of abduction, as in the painting of Veronese, but of return and renaissance. Return home, to a home filled with dreams of the future, free from myths of the past, by no doubt very well protected, but by no doubt resembling not the shape of weapons, but the imagination of both our children and our founding fathers, to a vision that is ours to make real. Thank you very much. And now, as a host, I am honored to pass the floor to the President of the European Council, Antonio Costa.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, dear Eddie, for your, it's true, rainy, but very warm, creative and inspirative welcome for this first EPC summit which takes place here in the Western Balkans. The title of today's meeting is very fitting, A New Europe in a New World. I believe that is the main question for the European political community today. What is Europe's role in this new world? After the end of the Second World War, we built a new global order based on the United Nations Charter, international law, and increasing trade and cooperation. That international order was not perfect, but it provided a solid framework for peace and growing prosperity, especially here in Europe. Now, that rules-based order is being undermined from many sides. Russia's aggression against Ukraine brought large-scale war back to the European continent. This war is an assault on the international community, on all the principles we hold dear, like national sovereignty, the inviolability of international borders, and territorial integrity. The situation in Gaza is a humanitarian tragedy, where international law is systematically violated, where a whole people is being subjected to crushing disproportionate military force. For decades, international trade and economic cooperation connected peoples and spread mutual prosperity. Now that interdependency is being turned into an instrument of power and pressure. Multilateralism has been the glue connecting humanity with the United Nations at its core. Peace and security, climate change, human rights, all of these global issues can only be advanced if we act collectively. And yet, multilateralism is under relentless attack. Europe has an enormous stake in all of these areas. So our continent needs to join forces. Europe must succeed in bringing a just and lasting peace to Ukraine. International law must prevail, and we know, dear Volodymyr, that your security is also our security. Europe must also invest more in its own defense, because we have learned that peace without defense is an illusion. Europe must succeed in creating the conditions for a two-state solution in the Middle East, because continued neglect will not just undermine the stability of Europe's neighborhood, it will fatally weaken our moral authority in the world. Europe must succeed in deepening and extending its networks of global trade and prosperity. We should never give in to the temptation of protectionism, but we should always aim for mutual beneficial partnerships and avoid a zero-sum mentality. Europe must succeed in defending multilateralism by leading on the implementation of the Pact for the Future, by upholding the Paris Agreement on climate change, by protecting the oceans like a global common good, and, of course, by remaining a staunch pillar of the United Nations. And Europe will succeed. I want to tell you today that the European Union is ready to play its full part in this new Europe, in the new world, working closely with all our European partners. The EU will remain a reliable partner, a predictable partner in European integration, in economic and energy cooperation, in security and defense, in protecting our climate. So, use the energy, the motivation, the faith of these children, and the energy of our friend Edi Rama to get work together as Europeans. Thank you.
And now it's my honor to pass the floor to the President of the Republic of France, Emmanuel Macron. Your Majesty.
Merci, Eddy. Merci beaucoup de nous accueillir pour ce sommet et félicitations pour le résultat électoral et en effet ce chemin européen et cette confiance dans l'avenir, dans l'Europe que tu as exprimé. Merci et je suis heureux de retrouver ici tous et toutes pour ce 6e sommet de la communauté politique européenne et le premier dans la région des Balkans. Et donc merci pour l'immense hospitalité et aussi pour avoir rappelé que derrière le rêve européen et ce qui nous unit, l'Europe n'est pas simplement une géographie, mais elle est toujours une mythologie, un récit et une traversée. et de rappeler que cette Europe de la Renaissance, des Lumières, celle de la paix, du progrès et de la culture est celle qui nous a inspirés et qui, au fond, donne envie. Néanmoins, nous nous retrouvons dans un moment de la vie de nos nations et de cette région qui, je crois, emprunte d'une certaine gravité la rencontre d'aujourd'hui, compte tenu des enjeux qui sont les nôtres. Et en fond, en essayant de préparer cette rencontre, je frappais de voir à quel point, et de manière sans doute inédite, on a aujourd'hui sur notre Europe un défi sur toutes les sécurités. Et réunir cette Europe large, au-delà de l'Union européenne, réunir justement entre égaux tous les chefs d'État et de gouvernement et toutes les nations qui sont ici représentées, c'est essayer de donner une chance à notre grand continent de faire face aux défis qui sont les siens à travers l'unité. Et je pense que l'unité entre nous tous est indispensable aujourd'hui compte tenu des menaces et des risques de division qui pèsent sur le continent. Évidemment, la première sécurité est la sécurité géopolitique. Vous l'avez exprimé l'un et l'autre. Et les menaces de guerre, de division qui frappent l'Europe et qui parfois menacent sa propre unité. C'est d'abord évidemment la guerre d'agression russe en Ukraine. Et Volodymyr sait combien ici il a notre solidarité. Et je pense que la bataille que nous menons tous, que nous avons portée nos collectifs la semaine dernière avec Keir, Donald et Friedrich, la coalition des volontaires qui s'est constituée et unie beaucoup ici autour de cette table pour soutenir l'Ukraine est importante. D'abord pour obtenir le cessez-le-feu. Et si besoin était, je crois que les dernières heures ont montré à cet égard que la Russie n'avait pas envie de cessez-le-feu. Et que s'il n'y a pas une pression accrue des Européens et des Américains pour obtenir ce résultat, il ne sera pas spontané. Et au fond, la Russie veut reprendre des discussions qui sont connues, celles qui se sont tenues entre février et mai 2022, qui n'ont pas empêché les crimes de guerre à Boutcha et ailleurs, et qui n'ont donné aucun résultat. Et nous devons pousser sur ce chemin et bâtir une paix juste et durable pour l'Ukraine. C'est aussi tout le travail qui est en train d'être finalisé, et j'espère qu'il sera parachevé et qui permettra un traité de paix entre l'Arménie et l'Azerbaïdjan, et je veux dire ici vraiment à Nicole et Ilham notre plein soutien à tous pour obtenir sur ce chemin la signature de ce traité de paix. C'est d'avancer sur des questions qui restent entre Belgrade et Pristina. C'est d'apporter notre soutien à la Moldavie, victime chaque jour des ingérences russes. Et c'est rappeler l'importance d'échéances électorales en cours qui, là aussi, on le sait très bien, font l'objet de telles ingérences. Et enfin, comme vient de le dire Antonio, c'est nous coordonner pour apporter une réponse tous ensemble à la situation humanitaire inacceptable à Gaza, obtenir là aussi un cessez-le-feu immédiat, une réponse humanitaire, puis une réponse politique, qui est la seule possibilité d'avoir un chemin qui est clé pour l'unité de nos pays et les principes que nous défendons, mais qui est aussi le seul moyen, au vu du reste du monde, d'être compris sur ce que nous faisons sur l'Ukraine. Et je ne compare aucune situation, mais je veux insister pour nous tous sur cela. L'essentiel de l'humanité, la Chine, l'Inde, le continent africain, le proche Moyen-Orient, le Pacifique et l'Asie et l'Amérique latine nous regardent. Parfois, ils ne comprennent pas totalement ce qu'on fait sur l'Ukraine, soyons lucides, mais il faut l'assumer et l'expliquer. Mais elles ne nous comprennent plus du tout sur l'Ukraine quand nous restons silencieux sur Gaza. Ce qu'elles nous disent, vous êtes étranges, vous nous dites que notre vie est en jeu quand il y a la souveraineté territoriale qui est attaquée, puis vous fermez les yeux quand il y a un massacre. Et je ne compare rien, je sais les histoires, mais je veux vraiment ici nous réveiller collectivement sur la cohérence que nous devons tenir sur ces points. Au fond, nous le voyons, toutes ces situations montrent le besoin de paix, la nécessité évidemment de revenir par la diplomatie, mais c'est le chemin sur lequel nous devons trouver l'unité pour notre sécurité et sur lequel nous devons construire aussi une réponse collective et derrière, pour être crédible, là aussi, avoir une réponse commune. Une large majorité d'entre nous font partie de l'OTAN, mais nous avons aussi besoin d'avoir un pilier européen fort dans l'OTAN et d'agir en européen pour notre sécurité collective. Et les dernières semaines et les derniers mois l'ont montré. Et l'Europe large, prend encore plus de force et de pertinence dans le moment que nous vivons pour justement assurer sa propre sécurité. La communauté politique européenne est aussi l'espace qui permet de bâtir la sûreté pour nos populations. Et à cet égard, la lutte contre les trafics de drogue, le narcotrafic, la lutte contre l'immigration illégale sont des sujets essentiels que nous avons commencé à évoquer tous ensemble et sur lesquels je souhaite que nous puissions ensemble commencer à structurer des coalitions d'États, d'organisations internationales, d'agences européennes spécialisées pour lutter contre les trafics, notamment portuaires et fluviaux, et bâtir des échanges de données, lutter contre le financement illicite, le blanchiment et la corruption, et renforcer les programmes de prévention. Mais c'est une bataille qui est clé, qui est attendue par nos populations. Tous ces trafics sont liés entre eux, et la communauté politique européenne est aussi l'espace qui permet de bâtir des coopérations très concrètes en la matière. Troisième élément, c'est la sécurité démocratique. Alain a versé la porte ô combien dans tous ses discours et à travers son organisation. Mais nous voyons à travers nos élections, la Roumanie le vit en ce moment, je l'évoquais, la Moldavie l'a vécu il y a très peu de temps, nous avons très clairement des menaces qui sapent l'intégrité de nos démocraties, qui minent leur résilience, et nous subissons des manipulations lors des périodes électorales, mais des ingérences informationnelles étrangères à peu près tout le temps. Et c'est quelque chose qui sape la sécurité démocratique de notre Europe. Et donc face à cela, et à ces fameuses FIMIS, nous avons lancé à Blenheim l'initiative qui a été portée avec Maya Sandu en créant un réseau de points de contact au niveau de la CPE pour améliorer la coopération entre nous. Et il faut aller plus loin en protégeant mieux nos infrastructures critiques face aux cyberattaques, en renforçant nos cadres réglementaires sur les contenus illicites en ligne, en traquant les flux financiers qui alimentent ces actions hybrides, mais cette sécurité démocratique est essentielle. Sinon, en particulier la Russie, continueront de déstabiliser nos opinions publiques pour bouger les lignes. La Commission européenne, je le sais, a des initiatives en cours, mais ce qui a été porté par Maya à Blenheim, je pense, est un point important sur lequel on peut accrocher tout ça. Puis le dernier point, c'est la sécurité économique. Je l'évoquais à Budapest, mais je pense qu'on n'a pas encore suffisamment pris la mesure que nous constituons un marché de 700 millions d'habitants. Et ce marché a une puissance extraordinaire. Il est beaucoup plus gros que le marché américain, il est beaucoup plus cohérent, et en fait, compte tenu du niveau de vie moyen, il est plus structurant que le marché chinois. Si nous savons agir tous ensemble, c'est une énorme puissance de feu. D'abord, en renforçant les coopérations, en abattant les barrières tarifaires, en ayant de la convergence réglementaire, pour faire de notre grande Europe, de notre large Europe, quelque chose de beaucoup plus uni sur le plan commercial et sur le plan de l'intégration économique. C'est tous les débats qu'on a entre l'Union européenne et Royaume-Uni et qui sont menés en ce moment, mais c'est aussi les débats qu'on avait eus et que vous aviez structurés, en particulier Alexandra et Eddy sur toute la région. Mais je souhaite qu'on puisse vraiment aller beaucoup plus loin sur cette intégration économique de la région, indépendamment des sujets d'élargissement et d'Union européenne. Et je pense que nous devons nous coordonner très fortement pour faire face à toutes les attaques extérieures ou, au fond, à tout ce qui crée de la concurrence déloyale. On est tous face aux tarifs américains, coordonnons-nous. On sera beaucoup plus fort si on se coordonne avec un marché de 700 millions d'habitants et de consommateurs. On fait tous face à la concurrence déloyale de certains produits venant d'Asie, en raison de différences de règles ou de la sursubvention de surcapacité. Coordonnons-nous, on sera beaucoup plus fort pour protéger nos marchés et ce commun. Et donc, je souhaite qu'on essaie de structurer aussi une réflexion et un travail autour de la sécurité économique à l'échelle du continent et donc autour de la communauté politique européenne. Voilà les quelques mots que je voulais dire, mais au fond, on le voit bien, notre grande Europe est à un moment de réveil géopolitique. Si justement on veut éviter le rapt et la Renaissance a continué de peindre les mythes et au fond le grand risque que Europe court, alors je ne sais pas si c'est Zeus transformé en taureau qui la ravira, ce que je sais c'est que les risques se multiplient face à nous et que la communauté politique européenne est un espace qui nous permet de structurer sur le plan géopolitique et militaire, sur le plan des sécurités et de la sûreté de nos pays, sur le plan économique et sur le plan démocratique, des réponses très concrètes par des coalitions d'action. Et donc pour ça, je pense qu'il est temps, comme ça avait été proposé par Victor et comme Eddy l'a suivi, en effet, de formaliser par un secrétariat léger une équipe de coordination de soutien pour suivre les projets concrets de la CPE, qui pourrait être assurée par la troïka des présidences et le président du Conseil européen, et du coup à chaque fois de pouvoir prévoir les 2 présidences à venir, ce qui permettrait d'avoir en permanence des troïkas et un suivi des projets que nous lançons dans ce cadre. En tout cas, Eddy, merci de nous permettre de nous retrouver à Tirana et merci pour l'hospitalité et l'amour lyrique de notre Europe que tu portes.
Thank you, and now it's an honor to give the floor to a special friend of all of us and my dear friend V, the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky.
Thank you so much. Dear friend, thank you so much. Eddie, Prime Minister Ramar, thank you, and thank you, Albania, for hosting us today. Not just in a beautiful country, but in a country that believes in Europe and stands for its future. Dear friends, thank you all for your support, and I appreciate that we share the same understanding. This war Russia against Ukraine must be ended as soon as possible and in a just way. Ukraine needs peace. Peace in Europe depends on whether Ukraine will get it. All of you know that this week we had a real chance to take important steps toward ending this war, if only Putin had not been afraid to come to Turkey. I was in Ankara yesterday, and thanks for participation and hosting us, President Erdogan. And I was ready for a direct meeting with Putin, whether in Ankara or in Istanbul, and not just for a meeting, but to resolve all the important issues to my mind. But he didn't agree to anything, Putin. And you can also see that the Russian delegation that came to Istanbul is of a very low level. None of them are people who actually make decisions in Russia. Still, I send our team to Istanbul, led by Ukraine's Minister of Defense, at least to see if those Russians can actually decide anything. Our number one priority is a full, unconditional and honest ceasefire. This must happen immediately to stop the killing and create a solid basis for diplomacy, first of all. And if the Russian representatives in Istanbul today cannot even agree to that, to ceasefire, to this clearly necessary first step, then it will be 100% clear that Putin continues to undermine diplomacy. If that's not the case, there must be at least some result today, starting with a ceasefire. The Ukrainian delegation has a mandate to make decisions. As we saw yesterday, Russia sent almost the same people it sent in 2022. This shows that Russia has not changed its basic approach. They make many statements, many threats, but solve nothing. They are doing everything they can to turn this Istanbul meeting into a staged, empty process, just like the ones in 2022. It's not us or Western leaders who are disrupting the negotiation as the Russians have been claiming for years. It's Russians who send empty heads to the talks. And that's what destroys the meaning of diplomacy. So if it turns out that the Russian delegation really is just theatrical and can't deliver any results today, the world must respond. There needs to be a strong reaction, including sanctions against Russia's energy sector and banks. Pressure must continue to rise until real progress is made. Ukraine is ready to take all realistic steps to end this war. I call on Putin to give his delegation real authority, and we need a full stop to the killing, long enough to give diplomacy a real chance. Secondly, we must build at least a minimum level of trust in the negotiation process. This can be done by releasing prisoners of war, returning Ukrainian children taken by Russia, and releasing civilian hostages currently held by the Russian side. Third, we need to clearly define which issues must be handled at the leadership level, not below. And we all know who makes the real decisions in Russia. Fourth, together with our leaders and together with the countries who are here with us today, we have begun to create a new security architecture for Ukraine and all of Europe. I thank everyone who is on board. Now it's time to move to very practical steps. And fifth, the United States. President Trump wants to end this war. We need to keep working closely with President and stay as coordinated as possible. Long-term US support is also essential. An American backstop is needed. It's important that we all work together on every level to make that happen. And of course, I will keep you informed throughout the day about what is happening in Istanbul and whether there is any chance the Russian delegation will take real steps to stop the killing and bring the war to an end. Thank you, Eddie, again for the invitation.
Thank you so much, and it's a particular honor to have here with us, and always a special guest in Albania, the President of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Mr. President, you have the floor.
Değerli devlet ve hükümet başkanları, kıymetli katılımcılar, sizleri şahsım ve milletim adına saygıyla selamlıyorum. Avrupa Siyasi Topluluğu 6. zirvesinde sizlerle tekrar bir arada olmaktan büyük bir memnuniyet duyuyorum. Arnavutluk Başbakanı değerli dostum Sayın Edi Rama başta olmak üzere zirvenin düzenlenmesinde emeği geçenlere teşekkür ediyorum. Kıtamızı yeniden tanımlayacak yeni bir vizyonu konuşmak için bir araya geldik. Birlik içinde, işbirliği temelinde ve ortak eylem ruhuyla hareket etmemiz her zamankinden daha fazla önem taşıyor. Uluslararası alandaki güven bunalımının aşılması için adil ve kapsayıcı bir küresel yönetişim mimarisinin tesis edilmesine ihtiyaç var. Güvenliğin bölünmezliği ve refahın daha hakkaniyetli paylaşılması ilkeleri üzerinde bina edilecek bu dönüşümü bizler Avrupa kıtası olarak öncelikle kendi evimizde başlatmalıyız. Savunma sanayi, enerji, ulaştırma koridorları ve bağlantısallık, arz ve tedarik zincirleri, dijital piyasalar ve kritik mineraller gibi muazzam işbirliği potansiyeline sahip olduğumuz birçok alan bulunuyor. Avrupa güvenliğinin geleceğini istişare ettiğimiz bu kritik dönemde Avrupa Birliği'nin kendi savunma sanayisini geliştirmesine yönelik gayretler faydalıdır. Bu çabaların NATO'nun merkezi rolünü aşındırmayacak şekilde birlik üyesi olmayan müttefikleri de kapsaması gerektiğini düşünüyoruz. REARM ve SAFE gibi girişimlerin bu anlayışla yürütülmesinin Avrupa güvenliğinin hayrına olacağına inanıyoruz. Geçmişte Avrupa'da yaşanan birçok savaş ve ihtilaf bize göstermiştir ki savunma ve güvenlik gibi son derece hayati olan konularda bölündükçe zayıflıyoruz, birleştikçe güçleniyoruz. Kıymetli dostlar, ortak geleceğimizi düşünürken hiç şüphesiz ekonomik güvenliğimizi teminat altına alacak adımları da istişare etmemiz gerekiyor. Türkiye 1,3 trilyon dolar ekonomik büyüklüğü, 85 milyonu aşan genç ve dinamik nüfusu, rekabetçi sanayisi ve büyük tüketim pazarlarına doğrudan erişimiyle kritik önemdedir. Avrupa Birliği ile gümrük birliğimizin güncellenmesinin tedarik zincirlerinin güvenliğine katkı sunacağı kanaatindeyiz. Ayrıca bu adımın otomotiv, ilaç, savunma sanayi gibi kritik sektörlerde ortak üretim ve yatırım imkanlarının önünü açacağına inanıyoruz. İnsanlarımızın ve dolayısıyla mal, hizmet ve sermayenin hareketliliğini kısıtlayan Schengen gibi vize uygulamalarının da gözden geçirilmesi şart. Son yıllardaki yatırımlarımızla ve doğalgaz alanındaki anlaşmalarla ülkemizi bölge coğrafyası için önemli bir enerji merkezi haline getirme hedefimize adım adım yaklaşıyoruz. Bölgenin en gelişmiş enerji altyapısına sahip ülkesi olarak enerji dönüşüm sürecinde Türkiye Avrupa'da önemli bir aktördür. Yenilenebilir enerji alanındaki adımlarımız sadece ülkemiz için değil, tüm bölge için fırsatlar sunuyor. Çok taraflı ulaştırma güzergahlarının merkezinde konumlanan Türkiye, Avrupa'nın kesintisiz tedarik zinciri
at a critical juncture for the guns to fall silent and for peace to be established in Ukraine. Today, as in the past, we contribute to each and every one of the efforts towards a solution, with comprehensive ceasefire being our priority. Due to the sensitivity of the process, encouraging the parties without imposing on them anything is very important in terms of achieving a just and lasting peace. I had meetings separately with President Trump, President Putin, and President Zelensky. And President Macron and Prime Minister Meloni called me. President Zelensky was in Ankara yesterday. After our meeting with him, he decided to initiate technical negotiations. For the first time since March 2022, an important window of opportunity has been opened up to stop the bloodshed. We believe that this opportunity should not be wasted, and Russia, Ukraine, Turkey are holding now talks in Istanbul, headed by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Turkey. At this stage, we count on all of our partners to keep the channels of dialogue open. As I have always stated, there will be no losers in a just peace. Turkey will continue to do its share in this process. Distinguished heads of state and government, Gaza has been going through an unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe for the past 20 months. Every day, dozens of innocent people, mostly children and women, are slaughtered. We have to say stop to this, say enough to this. Netanyahu's non-compromising, aggressive and arrogant attitude endangers not only Gaza, but also our entire region and the people of different faiths who live there. We expect Europe to show the due aspiration and interest in the establishment of a ceasefire in Gaza. More than 2 million people have been starving in Gaza, and the international community has not shown any action in this regard. So we need to have, we have no conscientious criteria nor human dignity here. In addition to a permanent ceasefire, we must also mobilize all our means to guarantee the delivery of humanitarian aid and make Gaza livable again. Our main goal should be to implement the two-state solution, which will constitute the only sustainable solution. With the end of the nearly such a long conflict in Syria, a new and hopeful chapter has been opened. The announcement by President Trump of the U.S. that he will lift the sanctions against Syria is a very valuable step taken for Syria to prosper as soon as possible. With this decision, President Trump has once again shown the importance he attaches to regional stability and development. We hope that this decision will set an example for other countries. We expect the sanctions imposed by the European Union against the former regime to be lifted immediately and financial support to be provided for the reconstruction of the country. This support will also have an accelerating effect on the voluntary, dignified and safe return of Syrians outside the country. Distinguished heads of state and government, the current environment in which uncertainties are increasing obliges us to unite around common solutions. I sincerely believe that when we ensure solidarity, good use of our resources and sincere cooperation, there will be no threats and challenges that we cannot overcome as a continent. With these thoughts in mind, I hope our meeting will be beneficial for a safe, prosperous and stable Europe, and leave you all with respect.
Thank you very much. Now it's an honor on behalf of the people of the Protectorate of Albania to give the floor to the Italian Prime Minister and Protector of our country, Giorgia Meloni.
Dear colleagues, good morning everyone, and let me say thanks to Eddie, not for being a protectorate, but for his warm hospitality in the summit, and also for making me feel very young again with that video he showed in the inauguration. And I want also to congratulate Eddie for his absolutely unexpected re-election as the leader here of the Albanian government. I'm happy that Europe will continue to count on his spirit and his determination. Albania is hosting the European political community for the first time. I value it as particularly significant, not only for this nation, but for all of us. I have always considered the European identity as fact, established by history even before geography. A concept harder to enclose in a definition than to understand by impulse. Albania is, of course, Europe, just like Italy or Serbia or Norway, regardless of whether they are part of this or that organization. That is why it always makes me smile when someone attempts to claim the right to decide who's European and who's not. Among the states that are around this table today, several have decided not to join the EU, others aspire to be part of it. Both are no less European than the 27 EU member states. Yet the EU is today the soundest common home to achieve what I like to call the European reunification, attained amongst people who may differ from one another, and yet they are a part of one whole, like the different fingers of a hand. Peoples who have fought each other over the centuries, yet are in reality one single people. Also, for this reason, being here today means taking a step forward in the historic process of reunifying Europe, because if we really want to build a new Europe in a new world, like to call the two lungs of Europe. For this reason, Italy is committed in Brussels to asserting a strategic approach to the Western Balkans to take into due account, despite the complex challenges posed by the region, the need to provide these countries with a clear EU integration perspective. Of course, enlargement involves new challenges, but I'm convinced that the European integration of Western Balkans as well as towards the East is also a strategic investment on Europe's own security. To reigniting or detonating other crisis hotbeds. We have witnessed this in the Middle East and not only there. That is why we will continue to stand by Ukraine and to strive for this war to immediately come to an end, because our security and freedom depend on restoring the force of law over the law of the strongest. And speaking of Europe and freedom, I believe it is nothing more European than a people willing to risk everything to defend its own freedom and independence. Every day, the heroism and tenacity of the Ukrainian people reminds us what Europe is and what the deepest aspect of our common identity is: freedom. We defend our freedom and we want peace. Volodymyr and the Ukrainian people want peace, and we newly witnessed it yesterday. The world saw who was really willing to sit at a negotiation table and who was not. And this shows also with respect to certain propaganda who looks for peace and who doesn't. At the same time, we must not interpret what happened yesterday as a setback and throw in the towel. Instead, we must insist with determination to finally achieve an unconditional ceasefire and a true peace agreement with in decades and centuries in such a fast-changing world. Because if Europe sometimes proves unable to face the great challenges, it is no one else's fault. It is our responsibility. And it is up to us to choose whether to go along a decline or instead fight it. And if we decide to fight it, first of all, we need to regain awareness, which is mainly awareness of who we are, what the European civilization is, of the great achievements it has accomplished across the history of humankind. A synthesis of values resulting from the encounter between Greek philosophy, Roman law, Christian humanism, a synthesis of values that allowed European civilization to conceive a world in which the person is central, life is sacred, and human beings are free and equal. A civilization that respects the identities of the others without denying its own, and that builds peace where instead others see destruction. We are this. We are this before everything. And I think we have, first of all, to remember it every day if we want to build a Europe up to the role received from history. Thank you.
thank you, and with true gratitude for his historical visit yesterday as the first Prime Minister of United Kingdom to ever land in Albania for a bilateral meeting, and with the worldwide known Balkan spirit of forgiveness for having brought such an intense rain. I'm honored to give the floor to the Prime Minister of United Kingdom, Keir Starmer. Thank you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eddie, and it's really good to see everyone around the table here today. And thank you, Eddie, for bringing us together. I would remind you it was sunny when I got off the plane yesterday morning. We brought the sun from London, and this rumour that the weather is down to the British is completely wrong. But look, you've brought us together, Eddie. It is a really important day, a really important meeting, because this is a crucial moment for our continent. And that's been reflected, I think, in the remarks of everybody so far. And I was struck by your opening words, Eddie, because we are entering a new era. We are all saying that, and we need to recognise that it's a new era, but it's one characterised by volatility and instability, sadly. That is the new era that we are entering. As we do so, the opportunity for all European leaders to come together, each of us facing challenges for our security and our economies. I think as we do that, the value of the EPC could not be clearer. So it is very important that we're here today. That's why I was so pleased to host the summit last year at Blenheim Palace, very shortly after my government was elected, within the first 2 weeks. I was very pleased because it was very important for me to signal our intent from the very beginning to work more closely with our European partners and strengthen the UK's relationship with the EU, not based on rehashing arguments about the past, but looking forward to the future. And since then, as you'll have seen, we've dramatically stepped up our engagement with European allies, recognising that partnership is vital to our delivery of security and renewal, and particularly to working people in the UK who want that security and that renewal and deserve it. And we will be strengthening our alliances across Europe, which is why I was really pleased, Eddie, to be the first British Prime Minister to come for a bilateral visit here to Albania and work with you as our partners. And that's why I'm very pleased to be hosting Ursula and Antonio in London on Monday for the first UK-EU summit, a very important moment in this new era, and a moment that is about recognising that many of the challenges we face, whether that's migration, growth, security, they are shared challenges, and only shared solutions will solve them. And obviously our most urgent challenge here today is securing a just and lasting peace for Ukraine, a just and lasting peace. Those words, just and lasting, being so important. And that is why it's vital that we all step up to do more for our own defence. And last week I announced a major package of sanctions on the Russian shadow fleet, ramping up the pressure on Putin and protecting our critical infrastructure. And Emmanuel and I have worked very hard with many of you in recent months to bring together political and military leaders under our coalition of the willing, and I thank everybody who's been part of that. And of course, together with Friedrich and Donald, we joined Vladimir in Kyiv last weekend, not just an important symbol of solidarity and support 80 years after the end of the Second World War, and a reminder that the values that were fought for 80 years ago are precisely the same values that we are fighting for tomorrow, at the moment, in relation to Ukraine, but also an important moment to bring together, and supported by President Trump, the argument about an unconditional ceasefire, that Putin must come to the table for that unconditional ceasefire, and to issue, as we did last weekend, that ultimatum. Now, having issued that ultimatum, we must be prepared to follow through, because if Russia won't come to the negotiating table, Putin must pay the price. And I think yesterday, as already been mentioned, was further evidence that Putin is not serious about peace. Russia is dragging its feet and playing games, whilst Ukraine has shown itself to be the party of peace. And Vladimir, your leadership throughout this conflict, your leadership in fighting the Russian aggression and the resilience and courage of the Ukrainian people is, I think, something for us all to hold up, but also your leadership in the fight for peace, because it was you that put on the table some weeks ago now the unconditional ceasefire. So Ukraine is clearly the party of peace, and we all need to line up as allies to ensure that we get the ceasefire that is desperately needed and deliver sanctions if that is necessary. And the United Kingdom is fully committed to playing our full part, which is why we've boosted our defence spending to 2.5% of GDP in 2027, with the clear ambition to reach 3% in the next Parliament. And I know others here are stepping up, obviously, as well, so that together we deliver a generational shift in European defence and tackle the challenges that undermine our stability and security. And those challenges include migration, a challenge that preys on the most vulnerable and places a huge strain on our immigration system, as well as our public services. And that's why I put illegal migration on the agenda at Plenum, why I chaired a discussion on the topic in Budapest. I'm really pleased, Eddie, that you include it again on the agenda for today. Because the truth is, this is a challenge that crosses our borders, a challenge we have to confront together. All of our citizens want an immigration system that is fair and that works for the national interest. And now is the time to work together to secure our shared borders. And this approach is already paying off. Yesterday, I visited Durrës port and saw firsthand how the UK is working with Albanian law enforcement to disrupt cross-border crime. And in March, I hosted the first major international summit to tackle organised immigration crime, highlighting work with European partners that is already driving results. But now is the time to do more across the board on immigration, national security, and we all know it's absolutely critical to our economic security as well. So in a new era for trade and the economy, we will increase our resilience, strengthen our alliances, and reduce barriers to trade with our allies around the world and across Europe. In this time of great uncertainty and volatility, the UK will not respond by turning inwards, but by taking its place on the world stage, strengthening our alliances, supporting freedom and peace in Europe. And I thank you, Adi, again for convening us today in pursuit of those common themes and issues.
And it is a unique privilege to have the chance to congratulate in person in Tirana newly elected Chancellor of Germany. And it is, I believe, a lifetime chance to be the Prime Minister of Albania and have in your hands the possibility to give or not give the floor to the German Chancellor. So the floor is yours, dear Chancellor Merz, and congratulations, and we all look forward for the leadership of Germany.
Thank you, Prime Minister, dear Edi Rama. Many thanks for your warm welcome and many thanks for your hospitality here in Tirana. And let me say that I'm very happy to be here and to have the honor and opportunity to be with you first time in this distinguished group of political leaders of Europe. Thank you to all of you will send congratulations to my election, and I'm looking forward to a very close cooperation myself, but our new government as well, with all of you. So it's strongly needed, but we are ready to do so. Having said that, allow me to focus on 2 or 3 issues briefly. The first one is this European continent is challenged by something which we have not yet seen for decades, which is a very tough and strong war in Ukraine. This is not just a war against this country. If it were so, it was critical and terrible enough. But this is something which is directed against the entire political order of our continent. So you all know that Donald, Keir, Emmanuel and myself, we went to Kiev to see President Zelensky last Saturday, and we did that not just on our own behalf. Hopefully we did that on behalf of all of you, to show our decision and our commitment to this country and to this European political order. And we are determined, the 4 of us, and I hope all of you, that we have to continue to give support, strong support, politically, economically, financially, militarily, to this country. And our efforts have shown a very, very small diplomatic success. The fact that they are meeting today, first time for 3.5 years, is a very small but first positive signal. We have to do more on that, on diplomatic efforts, but we have to be very clear on our military support for this country as well. There should be no doubt that we are willing to continue to give our support. My second comment goes to our alliance with the United States. You know that my country is extremely grateful for what the Americans did after the Second World War. And we honored that several times in the last decade, especially last week when we celebrated, or when we thought about the 80 years of freedom and peace in Europe. I think that we have to undertake all efforts what we can to keep the Americans on our side. We cannot substitute or replace what the Americans still do for us in Europe, on our continent, and for our peace and freedom. We are faced with migration, and Keir Starmer mentioned that already. So let me give just one brief remark on us. We are faced with migration threats for a decade now. We are trying to resolve that. We will do anything what we can do jointly with the European Union, but we have to do something on our own. All what we are doing is in line with European law, and we are trying to coordinate our efforts with all our neighbors. And we are not willing to do anything what is giving new threats to you. But let's do it strictly, jointly, and efficiently. Third remark goes to our military procurement. We are all willing to spend more on military and on defense. That's true and necessary. But I have one demand. Don't let us talk about money only. We have to talk about efficiency, about the numbers of systems, and about economies of scale. We are not receiving enough material for our money. We are spending a lot of money, and we have to do more. But just spending more money on systems which are too numerous, on procurement which is too complicated, is not enough. So my country and my government is really ready to step forward in terms of more efficiency, better procurement, better cooperation on the European continent. And this is not against somebody. outside the European Union. This is just in favor for us. And my last point is, if we are talking about competitiveness of our industries, this is for itself important enough. But we all know that our political systems, that our democracies are at risk. And so if we are showing ourselves able to resolve the problems, the war, the strong migration problems, the competitiveness of our industry, we will prove that our political systems, that our governments, that our democracy is strong enough to do that. And that is, in my view, something which we have all to keep in mind when we are dealing with these issues on the European level. Last but not least, a promise. I know that there were some critics about the German engagement or the German commitment to Europe, to the European institutions and to the European Union. I asked my government to be as much as possible present on the European level, in the Council of Ministers, on other European institutions like this one and others, to show that Germany is clearly committed to what is necessary now in Europe, and that we are willing to find a new approach on our European commitment. That's not because we love Europe so much, that is because we all know that we can only be successful jointly. So many thanks for your warm welcome in this group. I'm looking forward to cooperate with you. I'm feeling very much at home in this group of people. Thank you so much.
And now I believe that you would agree with me that nobody better than our Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, can be trusted with the final word of this opening session. And in this scenery, you can have the role of the director of the kindergarten now.
Thank you very much, my dear friend Eddie. Thank you very much for convening us here. Outstanding again, as we know you. And indeed, many of you said that the changes we are living through are historic, without any question. When the wall fell in 1990, the end of history was proclaimed. And you all remember that we assumed that economic and political freedom would eventually converge and that this would unite people. Now, as we are here today, history is back, and so are geopolitics. What we have perceived as a world order is becoming a world disorder, triggered not least by Putin's imperialistic ambitions and other geopolitical struggles. In recent years, and just as we spoke here, Emmanuel, the need for a wake-up call for Europe has often been articulated. Well, today Europe is awake, wide awake. And we know that we must leap forward. We have to close the innovation gap. Eddie, you mentioned it. We have to boost our competitiveness. We have to build our own resilience. And we have to widen and deepen the network of partnerships that we have around the world. We all have learned that when there are big crises, Europe certainly provides some of the big answers. And we all know it in the last years, the pandemic, the climate crisis, Russian war against Ukraine. All these are serious crises that have really challenged us, but Europe has emerged bigger and stronger from every crisis. Europe has moved closer together in the face of these turning points in history. And Europe has stood united in its unwavering support to Ukraine. Because we should not forget, this is also why the European political community has been founded and created, to rally around Ukraine in the face of Russia's aggression and to preserve peace on the continent. while Russia has left Europe. The mere fact that we are sitting here today together with you, Volodymyr, is proof of our ironclad unity. For 3 long years now, we have demonstrated our unity, our resolve, and even greater cooperation to defend the sovereignty of Ukraine, to find a path towards a peace settlement, and strong security guarantees for Ukraine. And all along the way, most members of the EPC supported hard-hitting sanctions on Russia, and these sanctions are biting. Russia's oil and gas revenues have fallen by almost 80% compared to before the war. Russia's deficit is skyrocketing. Interest rates are prohibitively high. Inflation is on the rise, well above 10%. And we are ready to do more to bring Putin to the negotiation table. Many of the speakers mentioned it. This war has to end. You said it, Georgia. You said it, Keir. Volodymyr has described with others the roller coaster of the last days. To be very clear again, we want peace. And so we are working on a next set of sanctions. Main elements of this package will be, for example, sanctions on Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2, further listing of vessels in the shadow fleet and lower the oil price cap, and more sanctions on Russia's financial sector, because we want peace and it is time to seriously engage on that. But we are also gathered here in Tirana to build our common future. And it was wonderful to listen to the different speakers. Our future of a Europe that is an era of shared prosperity. If we are successful in building this prosperity, and I have no doubt we will, that is the glue for stability and peace on our continent. This is stronger than any aggression, shared prosperity. To do this, connectivity must be high on our agenda. We are already creating such opportunities through our Ukraine facility and our growth plans for the Western Balkans and Moldova. And soon we will look at the Black Sea with a dedicated EU strategy for the Black Sea and a connectivity agenda linking Europe with Central Asia through our partners of the South Caucasus. This is an amazing vision to work on, to invest in cross-border transport infrastructure, the flow of trade, create digital links, connecting people around the European political community. Our web of partnerships have been developing at light speed during the last 3 years. And this is what is making the EPC more than an idea or a forum. It is the expression of our ability to address and to master together the challenges that occur as Europeans. And it is with confidence and with hope and with determination that I can say at the very end, long live Europe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and I want to share with you that in our first common law, written in Middle Age, there is a very fundamental chapter about hospitality. And it starts with a quote that goes, "The house of the Albanian belongs to God and the guest." And that quote is really very profound, and it's the origin of the fact that we ended the Second World War as the only country that had more Jews after than before, because they were guests in this country and they were protected with Albanian lives. But among many commandments, feeding well the guest is absolutely crucial. So please follow me now, and if you have been told by EU that there is no free lunch, you will change your conviction. There is, and there will always be for you anytime you come to Albania in whatever capacity. And in 1 hour, we have to go back and to make Europe work. Thank you.
Thank you.